Well, let's dive in. It's fun to sit down. We're at Frederica Golf Club. This is a place that you hang out at, and we got to walk around yesterday. We watched a mini tour event. It's super fun. It's been great to hang out. Thanks for spending the time. Absolutely. I appreciate it, man. So if people don't know you, how do you introduce yourself?
I am in the sports management business, which sometimes can be referred to as an agent. I can be referred to as a coach. I can be referred to as a life coach, a performance coach, all the above.
Gotcha. And who are some of the players you've worked with over the years in that capacity?
Well, I was with Davis Love III for a long, long time. But Lucas Glover, Jonathan Bird, Brant Snedeker, Harris English, Brian Harmon, lots.
Hey, thanks for watching this podcast. This is the video version. It's just a snippet of this full conversation. If you want the full episode, head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We'll have some links down in the description so you can listen to the full thing, as well as the weekly podcasts that come out on Golf Science Lab. Hey, thanks for hanging out. Keep watching. We'll see you over on the podcast feed.
So we were walking around yesterday watching these guys. It's a G Pro tour, this mini tour. I'm sure you've walked around mini tour events and looked at players like that hundreds of times.
Absolutely.
Right? And you've seen players at all different levels, from the highest of highs to that level. What do you look for? Like when we're out there walking around, like what do you think is the difference between someone there and then someone who's going to make it?
Finally make it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of tendencies that great players have. Their approach to each shot seems to be almost the same cycle of time. Standing over, regardless if it's a driver or a wedge or a putt, they seem to spend the same amount of time in their pre-shot routine, and then once the ball, make contact. So you can see that. Watching reactions are what I do mostly out there. It's a tough game. You're going to get bad breaks. You're going to get good breaks. How people react to that. And the guys that seem to keep the steady forward motion going are the ones that seem to have the greatest chance to make it out there. The highs and low guys, they just seem to have shorter careers overall on tour. You can look at anybody out on tour. Davis Love's a perfect example. I mean, you can't tell if he made an eagle or a triple. And it just doesn't change what his job is, which is the next shot. And so these guys you see out there, they're reacting to every shot, the good or bad. It's just not businesslike, and that's what you see, the tendencies.
I mean, you mentioned like it's a marathon, right? You have to conserve your energy. You have to go through all those steps to understand. The way that you work with players, it's for decades, hopefully, right?
Yeah, 30 years, yes. It's the approach, and people that have incredible careers, they get beat so many times. They lose so many times. And if you're looking at it in a win-lose scenario, you're going to be always in this, either I'm great or I'm bad. And the guys that are playing well, they start to realize through the process that it's just a shot at a time. And that sounds so cliche, but it's just a shot at a time. And whether it hits something and goes on the green or hits something and goes in the water, it's just a shot. And it just has got to have the same emotional value. And you see guys that, when guys are making a lot of birdies, the really good ones you can't tell. They're just kind of businesslike. And I think that's what you always look for.
I mean, it's so hard. I just think back to, junior golf. You live and die by every shot and every round, right? You think it's the end of the world.
Oh, yeah.
And I can only imagine what it's like, playing when your money's on the line and you're trying to make a living. How difficult, how hard that actually must be when you're in that position.
Yeah, everybody spends so much time on the range hitting balls and practicing their technique, and they practice, their wedge game, their putting. And they don't realize that they've got to practice how to emotionally handle golf. And so in these tournaments, if we're playing good or bad, the guys that understand what they're really up against and that it's not today, this shot's not going to matter one way or the other, but the trend that they set for themselves as far as being in a routine and pre-shot routines and how they handle a good day and how they handle a bad day has a whole lot to do with their future.
So one of the things that you do is you kind of manage the entire team for a player,
yes.
Right? Like you're looking at all these different components of what they need and,
yes.
and what they don't. And And that's a lot more than just looking at their golf swing technique.
Golf is so different in the sense that when a kid turns pro, it's the first time in his golfing career that he doesn't have a coach. Now, he's got an instructor. He may have a physiotherapist. He may have a psychologist, but he doesn't have a coach. And he comes out, and I liken it like this. A guy is getting ready to start a major business. I mean, you're talking about a multi-million-dollar business that golf is. And he is the CEO of this corporation. And the minute he turns pro, he's got so many employees. He's got an agent. He's got an accountant. He's got a caddy. He's got a trainer. He's got a psychologist. And managing that when you more than likely have never had a job is impossible. Nobody would hire you to be the CEO of a company if you've never had a job. And I always figure, I was taught by a really smart man that talent minus distractions equals performance. And so kids come right out of college and they are distracted by all the business stuff. So I've always tried to insert myself in between the player and all of those elements. I don't tell him what teacher to use. I don't tell him what caddy to use. I try to help inform him, but I try to manage all those relationships for him so that he doesn't get distracted and he can do his job like any other CEO would do. But that's the main, I'm a distraction eliminator. And people don't look at it like that. They think you're an agent and you're going to get me a deal. And you become a coach. You try to become that one constant between all the other, inconsistencies, right?
I mean, as amateur players, we're out here playing. We go through slumps. You start searching, right? You get a lesson. You try to find a swing tip on YouTube. It's just like it's what you do, right? And I can imagine it sounds the same thing as going through. It's find a new teacher, find a new thought. But your process has always been, let's figure out what got you here and let's stick with that.
History will tell you. I mean, guys that have success with an instructor, I mean, it is a rarity that they can switch instructors and get better. I mean, people can say that Tiger Woods left with Harmon and got better. I mean, that's debatable. I mean, he was already good, obviously, but once you're in the mode and they know what to work on, because, I've watched it for a long, long time. The great players, you go with them to a lesson and they work on the exact same thing they were working on 10 years ago. They always go back to the same faults.
And it's typically pretty simple stuff. They're not reinventing the wheel.
It's
that's
too
for
simple.
sure.
Sometimes it's alignment. Sometimes it's ball position. I've seen Butch Harmon walk up to a player that's not hitting it good and take his foot and move the ball back in his stance half an inch or an inch. And the guy hits a couple and Butch walk away. I mean, it was always so funny. I've seen him do it. But, yeah, these guys, they have a special talent. I always liken it to, Michelangelo was a sculptor. And he didn't practice sculpting. He just sculpted. And sometimes I see golfers practice themselves out of their own natural ability. And they didn't get to this level because they don't have they have the it factor. And the searching is just the mindset of not just allowing golf to happen. We always talk about, you've got to allow the golf ball to go where it's going to go. You're doing it, but, it's the trying not to try thing, right? But I use it just to allow the golf ball to do what it's going to do. But
so you say they have the thing. What about the guys you worked with who feel stuck, though? Like they get to the point, maybe they're on the Corn Ferry, they can't get off. Maybe they're hovering around 120 and they feel stuck in that place. How do you get over a hump of getting better, right?
Well, I mean, it's going to be individual, every player.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody may have to go to a new ball flight. I know a young guy he's been a draw bias player his whole life, and he's 30, and he now is, fading the golf ball. And it's changed his how many fairways he hits. It's changed his bad drives to become playable, and it could be as little as that. A lot of times, it just takes maturity. And you don't know when that time comes. And some guys get right out and make it, and then some guys it may take 5 or 6 years. But most of those guys have stayed the same course. And if you see somebody that's changing and moving around, it's not that they can't find a Band-Aid. And there's guys can go to different teachers. They're all good, but it really comes down to a consistent pattern of practice and play. And it's just my theory.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's very, it makes a lot of sense. It's very hard to execute on because it requires belief and patience. And those are two of the hardest things to have.
Totally. And you're talking about, probably the toughest game in the world. And you got mental aspects to it. You just don't know. Guys can tell I can tell guys know when they're going to start playing well. They're starting to click, whatever that means. It happens on the back nine of a tournament. They're going to miss the cut by 10, and they find it, and then they go and win the next week. And that's kind of waiting for that to happen, and that takes a special amount of patience. And I said it to somebody yesterday, you're not playing great, but what a great time. Practice your patience, go through your pre-shot routine, and do your job. And the results, you just don't have any control over.